So it's been a little while since I recorded one of these bad builds where we look at some exciting races where X a better Y. I think it's what it's called. Something like that. But the point is, we're back. And today I want to look at the concept of the Phoenixian. So I mostly got this idea from I think it's 3.0, 3.5. There's a thing called the Fouliarch, who are basically human phoenixes. And I was like, that's a neat idea. What would happen if there's a race that distinctly reincarnates? But we take away the phoenix part. We sort of like, okay, they're half phoenixes. They get the reincarnation part. They're kind of avian in nature, but it's not too difficult to hide. Like it's a minor disguise check to cover up the feathers and all that. Like you just gotta get a hood, whoop, and no one notices. Get some hood and some gloves, and you'll be fine. This race is different in a lot of ways, particularly mechanically. It's a very it's a race you're going to pick for the flavor more than anything. Although it comes with a lot of benefits. You may notice that phoenixes have high charisma and high dexterity because they're birds and because they look nice. Phoenixes, as I imagine, Phoenixians usually have tan skin from the innate heat. They literally get a tan from just how hot they are inside. They're slightly well done. Phoenixes are all over the place, but they tend to be pragmatic about the circumstances. A little bit romantic, but pragmatic in the end because, at the end of the day, survival does matter to them. They're medium-sized, but they're basically humanoids for the most part. But then comes the Phoenix part, which is extreme body heat. Resistance to fire and immune to non-magical fires. Non-magical fires are essentially any sort of overheating. Until we get to like magma levels. I guess I'll include it until we get to like magma levels. Gotta get that exclusion. Like, unless it's a particularly heat source. Like, they can walk through a desert just fine. And, non-magical fire doesn't do much to them because they are so hot inside that the external heat doesn't affect them. Their equipment will still burn and melt as usual. It's not like they're not going to catch fire. They're just going to be like, oh, I'm on fire. That's all right. And they just put their little thumbs up. However, you also take double damage from cold. I like the idea. I was going to go with doing double damage from Sonic 2. Sort of give them this weak, like they're strong against fire, but the minute you start throwing snowballs at them, they're like, oh no. They're immune from natural heat-based effects for better proximity to fire. Whenever they're like essentially exposed to cold for a significant portion, like a snowball is fine, but once you like throw a snowman at them, they'll start to suffer exhaustion as their body needs to self-regulate and repair itself, which is when you want to take that long rest, twice per short rest. I love the idea of you can add fire damage to an attack. It's not much. It's like a 1d6. You have to use an item that can conduct the heat and will not burn up. You can technically set your things on fire, but you can do that already. Like you don't need this is just you want to add some real damage to it. I think otherwise generally natural fires are 1d4 if it's not like a sticky fire or something that will add heat to the target. Actually, I just noticed the screen's a little... There we go. Finally, you can ignite fires just by focusing your body heat. So, you know how simple, like, oh, you must feel your chakras and flow into your hands. They can literally move their body heat and touch something and it ignites. Not spectacularly. It's not like suddenly a whole tree catches fire. It's more like they can hold their finger on something and eventually it will ignite. Depending on how strong and capable they are, they'll probably do good, which is nice. So they can... I imagine that if you're an old enough Phoenixian, if you're old enough, you could probably just focus your heat in one place and just make the air itself ignite. Like, you just ignite dormant elements in the air. Or you can, buy a bag of flour and blow up a dragon. I love that story. But what really sets a Phoenixian apart from others, like, there's probably other races. There's elemental, half-elementals, or, like, Jinn-related characters, like Ifrit-related characters that have heat-related powers. But let's say that your Phoenixian is a little bit different. When you die, you just turn to ash. It's as if you disintegrated, but your ashes are somewhat warm. And, well, once you turn to fire, once you turn to ash, if you're put in natural fire, you will rebirth. This means your character can't really die under most circumstances. I imagine, let's just say that you probably want to add like a means of destruction. Like if you throw them into cold water, they'll stop being active. If you hit them with X amount of ice damage, they'll also die. Like, as a GM, you might want to have a rule, like if you want to have Arc or Death, go with it. But otherwise, you want to look at it like, your character will turn to ash. Someone has to take that ash out of there. This is kind of where they're immune to non-magical fires, because non-magical fires bring them back to life. So logically, they can't take damage from it, because it's what brings them back. It would be kind of stupid if you brought back to life and you have 1 HP and you're like, I'm dead again. So it's the same fire. I could also add something with water. Like, you could do something and say, like, well, water also affects you in a certain way. Like, you can't swim very well. Like, you have an innate what's it called again? Aversion to water. But once you sit in the fire for 3 days, you come back. Woo! You suffer disadvantage on ability checks. It's sort of like you can't just throw yourself out there to die. You can't just be a kamikaze guy all the time. Also, if you explode, your ashes are all over the place, and let's just say you need at least 90% of the ashes. Good luck collecting all that stuff, because there's a good chance that some of it might slip between the cracks, and you might as well okay, you're gone. I imagine that after X amount of time, the ashes themselves would naturally become inert because the magic wears off. If they die of old age, there's a lot of resurrection spells that have this exclusion, like if someone dies of old age, the spell does not work. In this context, if you die of old age, what happens is you turn into a new being. When you rebirth, you are a new Phoenixian. You are not your old self. You might remember some things. I like to imagine that Phoenixians have. Yeah, this is the funny part. But when you come back, depending on what you do, like, no, they don't remember anything. The way it is you write something down. Phoenixians love writing memoirs because whoever comes after them is gonna need that memoir. In case someone's like, hey, you look like that guy. You're him, right? And it's like, oh, and you have to pull out your memoir. You have to double check everything. It's particularly bad with elves who probably know multiple incarnations. Even though it's like, hey, you're back. And you're like, no, I'm the other guy. I died like a couple of months back. Like, it's a whole story. I think you can decide whether or not you rebirth as a child, as a baby, as an adult. I imagine that because of how this process works, they probably come back as an adult after like a little bit of time. Although someone would still have to take you to the fire. So if you die out as a hermit, you might want to throw yourself in the flames before you actually die. Like, they probably just sit in a fire for a while, and they burn something that would burn for a long time, like a big giant coal mine. Ugh. I imagine that if you spread them out over a fire, they would naturally reform into one clump. Like, they would eventually just magically cohere to one form, wherever it's the best for them to fit. So they get a new class. They essentially become a new person. Depending on your GM, you might be able to negotiate, well, you have so much experience, you come back at this level. Like, it's sort of a respec method. But it also is like, hey, if this person dies from old age or something forces them to age rapidly, hey, they're still back. They're back. Woo! That's the mechanical part. But why I play Phoenixian? Phoenixians, I don't think I set an age for them. I like the idea that they can live for a long period of time, but it's kind of random at the same time. Maybe Phoenixians have like legends about how they work. Maybe it's like, well, Phoenixian dies when they have a child. Like, at that point, they start to enter a de-aging process. Like, having sex once is all it takes. Others believe that it is your exposure to cold, which is why some live on the hottest mountain, like near the lava, hoping that the eternal heat will keep them alive. Make something up. Make up a rule. Pick something. Otherwise, you can just be like, oh, they just live as long as a normal person does. They live as long as humans. But unlike other humans, when they reach max age, they die. Like, they have a set period permanently at which they must recycle, because otherwise their magical energy sort of stagnate. But yes, to a Phoenixian, all this stuff can be very bothersome. If your previous incarnation is a particular asshole, some people might remember. Like I said, elves can remember you, good or bad, and that's bad, really bad. The evaders. A lot of Phoenixians, I imagine, embrace rebirth with a sort of sense of like pride. They're like, okay, my time is over, time to die, and they embrace it and they just move on in life. But what if you don't want that? What if you want to stay alive? What if you want the next person to be you again? Then you leave all these books and information like magic items and all kinds of stuff. Most Phoenixians, I imagine, would be like, no, you give all your stuff to charity. You keep what you need to survive for like a year, and in that year you find yourself or something. I don't know. Maybe you hire a nanny if you reincarnate as a child. Don't forget to determine that first. And I'm a little bit overreacting here, but they call it blasphemy. It's sort of a thing you can use, like maybe the reason you're an adventurer is because your previous incarnation was an evader. Like, he left this whole pile of stuff in his house, and he forced himself to reincarnate in a fire he had, and it was like, oh no, you reincarnated without telling us, and you did all these illegal things, and, give it a little flair. Like, your character is like feeling super bummed about that. Next up is melee, the classes and all that definition. Phoenixians, because of their stats, they're rather tanky. If you're dealing with dragons that spit fire, you're gonna hold out pretty long. But there's nothing that particularly mechanically makes them exciting. What they are is they're hard to kill. If you got a party that can sweep you into a bag and take you away, congratulations, you're probably not gonna die anytime soon. Phoenixians aren't really going to have sorcery because, again, they don't breed very often, and there's not many Phoenixians out there. They're a relatively small population. So if you're a sorcerer, you're probably going to explore that because, hey, you're a sorcerer. I don't know if that would affect incarnations. I imagine, and this is if your GM is like really cool, if you're like the fun GM, you could be like, well, when you reincarnate, you actually get that extra level of sorcerer because you are, by blood, a sorcerer. And you get something there. But their durability makes them very apt for long fights. Not stat-wise, but their mentality is, I'm going to die anyway, but I'm going to come back. So they're a little bit more daring. They're the guys to jump not into a pool of acid. They're the guy to jump into, let's say, a lightning trap to trigger it so that the other friends can be fine. They're like, okay, we'll throw you in the fire and wait for you to come back. Now, what I think most, and this is something I haven't mentioned so far, or not really extrapolated upon, Phoenixians love multiclassing because to some extent they live for life, as I mentioned, and they live for the lives of others. Phoenixians, because of their seeming immortality, they love standing in for others. They love taking the brunt because they're like, I will come back, even if I'm not myself, even if it triggers my rebirth where I'm not myself, I want to sacrifice myself for others. Because to them, life of others is precious, life of their own is cheap. So they understand that. They're smart enough to know that. That's where that charisma comes in. They got that social awareness. They got that wokeness kids are talking about. They understand their advanced privilege of not being able to die in most conventional fashions, which is quite a privilege. It's kind of like being a lich, really. They're kind of liches in a sense, but they're nice liches, and you could probably kill them if you just toss them into an ice volcano or something. So a lot of Phoenixians will spread themselves thin. They'll find all kinds of resources so they can always be helpful. They'll generally look at healing magics and like practical magics. They'll look for things. As such, however, Phoenixians are thinly spread. I imagine that Phoenixians probably have like a higher level cap, quote unquote, where they can get more multi-classing abilities, but they mostly just get they don't get hit dice, they just get the abilities of said classes, because they're just meant for it. If you have a weird GM who's like, oh, you can go up to level 30, but you got to spend the other levels on like other classes, you can't have more than 21 classes. Like you could do something with that, like depending on what your GM is like, could work. Like this I like most is they're great melee fighters because they live for others. Phoenixians, again, they know their life is cheap, and that they can come back. The problem is, and I like this idea, Phoenixians die under two circumstances. One, they are destroyed, or two, no one bothers to bring them back. This legend might be true. Maybe in your world, Phoenixians actually lose their ability to resurrect once they breed and birth a child and raise one to adulthood. But what if a whole bunch of Phoenixians are just random ash? Like, you as a wizard are like detect magic, and you see a literal corpse smeared out over the floor in the form of ash, and you're like, holy shit. Wouldn't that be great? Like, you enter into a place, and it's like, all empty, and there's just one guy, and he's like, oh, I just moved in here, and there's like ash all over the place. And like, oh, he probably just lit some fires. And then you're like, oh, wait, that's Phoenix. Oh, okay. And it's like, well, things happen, people die. So that's Phoenixians. They're very flavorful, I like to think of them. You instantly have a personality and sort of an approach to how your character handles the team. Why are Phoenixians on adventure? Like, I should probably include a section for that. Like, why do they go on adventure? Like, I'll just use the section for why are they on adventure? Why are they in your game? And I think for Phoenixians, it's easy. They want to help. They want to help someone out. They want to do something and make the world a better place. So logically speaking, if Phoenixian is going to join a party, and they're going to probably die a couple of times. If your GM is a wuss and doesn't kill players very often, or just wants to see what it's like if someone dies and how bad that can make the action economy, here's a way to do it without having to worry about someone getting a $10,000 gem to pay for a resurrection spell. But yes, I'm sorry if I talk fast. That's just my natural cadence. I would benefit from talking slower because it makes me talk better. I'm glad to be back with bad builds because I do like doing this stuff. I need to get back into D. I need to get back into the flow of things. So what happens next time, I don't know quite yet. I'll roll up a thing and I'll do it. And then we'll see what comes next. It'll be great. Yeah.